I'd like to introduce Maggie Steber. Maggie is an internationally known documentary photographer, educator, and photo editor whose work has appeared in major magazines, newspapers, and book anthologies, as well as national and international exhibitions. She has worked in 72 countries, specializing in telling the stories of underrepresented people, and her work has been seen in 70 exhibitions in 35 countries. Best known for her photo essays in National Geographic magazine and her humanistic documentation of Haiti, she published Dancing on Fire, Photographs from Haiti with the publisher Aperture. She also has a 9-year project on her mother's melancholic voyage through memory loss, which was made into a multimedia presentation by MediaStorm and won a Webby Award. In her career, Maggie has worked as a picture editor for Associated Press, a contract photographer for Newsweek, and as a director of photography at the Miami Herald. Maggie is a member of a 7 photo agency. Maggie has received far too many numerous awards to actually mention here, but I want to just kind of flag up a few. She's won the Pulitzer Prize finalist, she's won the Guggenheim Foundation Fellow, and she has a Medal of Honor for contribution to journalism. If after hearing all of this, you really want to see Maggie's moving photographs, you need to check out her website. Maggie lives in Miami, Florida, in the United States. Thank you so very much, Maggie, because I know and you know that you had a life rich with experiences. So welcome, and thank you for sharing your stories seldom told.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And boy, that list makes me exhausted.
And that's only half. I mean, there were so many awards you won, and I thought, no, I think they need to Google you. They need to find your website and see and read and learn more about you. But as I mentioned to you, Maggie, when we last spoke, the idea of my podcast, Stories Seldom Told, it's a podcast where we just hear everyday stories that are inspirational, stories that have challenged our unconscious biases, and stories about how we've overcome these challenges. So let's just sort of dive straight in, Maggie. Could you share a story with us?
Well, it's interesting that you start out with this because I'm going to talk about Haiti. So I am very interested in everyday stories, and I love to tell the stories of other people if they're willing to share, because it's fascinating to see how people live and survive or don't. And I think it's such a privilege when people will talk to us and share their stories with us. It's really something we have to think about in a very tender way, I think, a very respectful way. And I'm very grateful when they're willing to do that. So I have worked in Haiti over a 30-year period, going back and forth. And the reason that I went to Haiti in the first place is that I had covered a war for 2 years in Africa, in Zimbabwe. And I've worked throughout Africa, and I love that continent so much. When I'm there, I feel that I belong there in a way that I can't really explain, except when I'm standing on the African soil. I feel this silent roar come up through my body. And I know that sounds weird, a silent roar, but I just love that continent because I belong there and I feel that very deeply. So when I came back to the United States, I really missed Africa, and my agent then said, why don't you go to Haiti? It still retained all of its Africanness, and we need a story there about the poverty and the politics. So I went to Haiti, and sure enough, it's in the Caribbean, and it has, of course, some colonial aspects to it because the French went there to start the sugarcane farms and things like that, many in the 1600s. And they brought the enslaved Africans there to work in the fields. And they, of course,
Have we lost you? So you were saying, Maggie, fact that you have the sense of belonging in Africa, and you have this quiet row. I love those two words, and I must ask you more about that word belonging in just a minute. But I want to finish hearing your story, and then your agent suggested that perhaps you should go to Haiti. So please do continue.
All right, so I did go to Haiti and I walked around a lot. I speak French, so that helped, but Haitians, really, the people that I wanted to talk to and photograph, they speak Creole. And over a period of time, I did learn Creole, and I love this language. Um, it's very forceful and amazing, but I just would walk around and I would listen to people and I would talk to people and I would watch a lot just to observe, to really soak things in and to learn things. Sometimes just by watching, as a visual storyteller, you learn a lot. Anyway, so the dictator president was getting married, and so it was very active. And I stayed and photographed that wedding, and it was pretty amazing. Anyway, and then I left, and I would go back and forth and back and forth. And every time that I went back, I was learning lessons. And, you know, we photographers go in to tell somebody's story, but we aren't them. And no matter how much we want to be them, we are not. And I always kept that in mind. And that I might take some pictures, but maybe I'm not even really getting to who they are. But it's one of the lessons that I learned there was that I was supposed to be there to learn lessons. And I loved that. And I was being taught lessons every day by people who were willing to talk to me, who were willing to let me into their homes, who would come up and talk to me. I started doing a project on these two groups of little street boys who hated each other, but they were children who had run away from home, or they were didn't have families, or they went to try to earn money for their mamas who had too many children. And I
One sec, Maggie, because I
Mhm.
just want to pause a little bit, because I think I would like the listeners to have a very brief 30-second summary, which is not easy, about Haiti. But can you tell us a little bit about the political unrest and why Creole, not French? Who are these
Mhm.
people? Can you just sort of set the scene about Haiti a little bit more for us to
Yes.
understand the history or the politics or what was going on when the very first time you went there?
Sure, because it's a fascinating history. So Haiti was taken over by the French in the 1600s, and then they brought in these enslaved Africans, and they were very cruel masters. And so eventually, the one thing that they allowed all of these enslaved Africans who did not speak the same language one to the other, but they had the drums, and the French would allow them to drum. And not realizing that drumming is an essential part of voodoo, no matter what language you speak or anything like that. And so over time, these enslaved Africans planned a revolt just by drumming one place to the other.
Brilliant.
And
I love this story. Yeah.
the French had no idea. And so one night it happened, and it was a massacre. It was horrible. Many of the French were completely decimated. They were killed. Women were killed. Babies were killed. It was a real massacre of the slave masters and their families. And then, after some machinations, they formed a government, and they eventually became the first Black republic in the history of the world. And it was the second republic in the world after the United States had declared themselves to be that. So these were very amazing people, you know. The French thought that, oh, they're just stupid and they're just here to, you know, they're like horses, and if they die, it doesn't matter, there's always more. But they were highly intelligent and survivors. And to this day, that's what Haitians are. They are so much more intelligent than they're given credit for. And they are survivors. And every day they're surviving. But so what happened is many years, and there were lots of different presidents and governments and everything. And so I think it was in the 50s when Papa Doc, he was called, came to power, and he was a fierce dictator, and many people were killed under his rule because he had the secret police, and he would just send them out. And the secret police were the law, and if they wanted your bureau, they would take it. If they wanted your land, they could take it. If they wanted your daughter, they could take her. And so he died eventually. He ruled really using voodoo to scare everybody. And he finally died, and his son, Jean-Claude Duvalier, who was called Baby Doc, became the leader. And the thing is, Baby Doc, he just wanted to drink and take drugs and play and flirt with women, and you know, he really didn't.
Wedding you attended? Baby Doc's
wedding, Baby Doc, yeah. Oh, Papa Doc, I would have to be 100 years old.
No, not Papa Doc. I meant to say it's Baby Doc. Yes.
Yeah, Baby Doc. And it was a remarkable affair. Actually, it was crazy. And so anyway,
okay. So you've come back. So thank you for that, because I think for those of us who don't know the history of Haiti, I think it's important to get some context. So you're there, you've attended Baby Doc's wedding, you've learned Creole, which is fantastic, and you are trying to get these two sets of children to communicate with each other who actually don't like each other very much. So what was that about? And you also mentioned that you realized after not just the first time, but the first and subsequent visits to Haiti, that actually the point of being in Haiti, you realized for yourself, was to continue to learn lessons for yourself. I think that's what you said. And that's a very powerful statement to make. So please, yes, back to you.
Well, I wasn't actually trying to bring the two groups of the street boys together, because that was never going to happen. But I still hung out with one group and then another group. And it was they who taught me Creole, actually. And sometimes adults would come up to me and say, why are you photographing these children? And because you're just trying to show how poor they are. And I said, well, then change it. And then I won't have it to photograph. Do you understand? You know, it's not my fault that they're poor, but I'm trying to show that. But you are a Haitian. If you don't want me to photograph this poverty, change it. So, and they didn't like that. But the little boys would say, go away, this is our mama.
Well, give me a lesson. Tell me a lesson that you learned there. You said you learned many lessons. So give us an example of one lesson that you learned.
Well, I just think that we often go in with preconceived ideas, because we read all the books, we read about the culture, we read about the history, we looked at photographs, maybe we looked at some of the art, which is extraordinary, and we go in with this list of things that we need to look for. But all of these things that have been shared with us in the outside world are written by people who are also just looking. It's like if you read all of the work that has been done on Haiti by anthropologists, we have to remember that most of those were white men who wrote that sort of thing.
That is inevitable, isn't it? Because that's how when you read in English, and it was written by, especially with gender those days, was more publications by men, not by women, and it was inevitably white people. Yes.
It's the white gaze on everything.
But you know, you said something else, Maggie, which I have to go back to, and the idea of your feeling that you belong when you arrived on the land, the continent of Africa. What's that about? Can you kind of delve a little deeper into that?
Well,
What does that even
I
mean
think,
to us?
well,
What does the
I
word belong mean, firstly? Let's get some clarity on
belong,
the word.
like you're in where you should be. You are where you should be. And I think that came to happen, that feeling that I had, because I would see things and be amazed by them, or they would look familiar, or I would think, this is so beautiful. I want to just stay here. I want to sit under that tree. I want to know more about it. I want to watch things, because watching things will teach me something. And I think I've always had a very close relationship to nature, because my mother was Cherokee, and she always had me touching the ground every day to make sure that the mother, that is Mother Nature, knew that I loved her. And so I think it's just this idea that sometimes you go to a place and it seems so familiar, like somehow, way back.
Two things going on in my head when you're saying that. One, of course, is the fact that you've just told us that your mother was Cherokee. Because looking at you and seeing you and hearing your name, I would not know that. So we,
Mhm.
Maggie Steber or Margaret Steber, however you'd like to be called, that's just a name. That sounds like a white American name. Um,
Mhm.
and the fact that your mother is Cherokee, and the fact that she wanted you to connect, to literally feel Mother Nature, literally. Um,
Mhm.
and that was from sort of birth. That was part of your DNA or part of your unconscious bias. And then there's something else. And as an Indian, I can't help but bring that up, because a large number of people who listen to my podcast in India, and they'll be nodding and saying, we know what that's about, Maggie. Certainly in
Mhm.
India, a lot of us talk about reincarnation. And you're saying something similar but different. But of course,
Mhm.
you had the additional connection to your actual roots, the roots of your mother. And then
Yes.
I question and I wonder, and I'm throwing it out there, this idea of generational stories, even if
Mhm.
they're not said out loud, they just embedded in you. Because we've
Yes.
all read about generational trauma, but there could be generational good things and bad things, right? So I'm just
Right.
kind of responding in a slightly different way based on what you just said. This idea of belonging, because it's such a strong word from my
It is.
perspective. And I love
Yes.
that you said that, but I'm trying to unpick it for all of us to feel it some more.
Well, I think what you said was actually really great, because this generational memory, I think if we accept that we have it, which I think we do genetically, and I mean, there's so many things that can't be explained. So why not? Yeah, that sounds right. That's possible. Um, and yeah, and I think also when you touch the earth, the whole planet feels it. If you believe this, so it connects you with the whole planet. But and my mother would also say, go outside and listen to the birds sing every morning. So when I was a little girl, I started going when I was 5 outside to listen to the birds singing if it wasn't winter. Um, and finally, when I was about 10, I said, Mama, I don't know what the messages mean. And she said, the messages mean they are telling you that they are still here. And they are telling you that we, as Indigenous people, are still here. And I never forgot that. And every day of my life since then, unless it was impossible, I would do that every day. And it gives me great joy when I start the day like that.
And,
And I've never forgotten that. So that is kind of a generational, yes, we're still here. We're still here.
and that really
So,
is so much about our own personal narrative and how we're influenced. But uh, I have digressed a little bit because I had to understand that what that meant to me and to our listeners, because of what you said about about the fact that your mother's Cherokee. But so could you tell us then, go back to Haiti and
Yes, back to
back to
Haiti.
Haiti and back to your life lessons learned.
Mhm.
So give us one lesson that you learned there.
Well, one of the things I learned was that the real Haiti is in the countryside, because in cities, there's been development, there's money, there are cars, people have jobs, there's government. But if you want to really find the real Haiti that has existed for centuries, you go into the countryside. And even there, the Creole language is a bit different. And there are certain things you do that you don't do in the cities. For example, if you come to a house and you're going to enter the ground, you have to say respect, respect, it's respect. And if you say it like it's a question, respect, and then the person, if they want you to come in, they say respect. So you have to know that. You can't just walk in. You have to wait, And the other thing I learned is that before, especially as a photographer, before I start photographing, I wait to be given permission. And especially because many of the things, respect, many of the things I want to photograph are intimate, and they're not, I can go do street photography. That's a bit different in the cities. Although some people don't like that either, and that's fine if they don't want to be photographed. I totally don't photograph them. During riots, that's a whole other situation. But so there was I learned not to just go in like a photographer, but to go in because I was supposed to learn something, that life lessons, and that would shape me and how I photographed, but more importantly, how I wanted to see people and understand people and try to get it as close to get it right, to get things right, and as close to who people really are and what they really do, and that honors them, and rather than honoring myself because I got this picture and I'm really unimportant in all of this, but I try so hard to give the Haitian people a voice, because everybody's always telling them, oh, you should do this, you should do that, and and there's a lot of danger. There is a lot of danger, and there's right now it's completely deadly to go to Port-au-Prince, the capital, because of these gangs, and they're killing so many people and kidnapping them, and it's out of control now. But so I found that the real Haiti still lived in the countryside, and that's what I wanted to find, the real Haiti. But also that I learned so much that it's not about me. It's never about me. It's always about them. And I think
That's
when
kind of one life lesson learned. I'm just trying to summarize for us that, and it doesn't matter whether it's photography, or whether it's something else. But when you're going out to do something and communicate, it's about listening, isn't it? That's what you're saying.
It's listening.
Somebody
It's
said
listening
story.
with your ears and listening with your eyes.
This is it.
And
it's about not trying to not judge. That's what you're saying.
No
Because
judgment.
it's so easy to try and jump to conclusions based on our history. Tell us another story, Maggie.
Well, about Haiti, or should I move on to another one?
Go to another country. You've been to 17 countries, and most people who are listening would not have had that privilege of traveling to 72 countries. So take us somewhere else.
I can't believe it myself. I've frankly had a life I never expected to have, but the ancestors have blessed me. So, and that's the other thing that we also, and many cultures, respect the ancestors, remember them, and celebrate them. And I talk to them every day.
That's the Cherokee culture.
Yes.
Cherokee ethnicity and ancestry, isn't it? That's wonderful.
Yes. We can talk to those who made us being here possible, and remember them.
Do you have a Cherokee name, Maggie?
No, I don't have. Actually, I was given a Cherokee name, but I didn't write it down, and I can't. But I did photograph for about 8 years this Cherokee Creek family in Oklahoma, the Wildcats, and they were very traditional. They lived in a very traditional way. And so they adopted me. And so I could legally be Maggie Wildcat Steber.
Oh, that's
So
wonderful.
it's
Oh,
nice.
that
It's
is
nice.
lovely. So yeah, sorry, you were taking us to another
Well,
country. Where are you
I
taking us?
wasn't going to take you to another country. I was going to
Oh,
take you
okay,
to, if that's all right, I
that's
was going
fine.
to take you to something that's kind of my own story, but it's the story of my mother. And so my mother raised me by herself. My parents were married, but when I was 6 months old, my mother divorced my father. He was mean, apparently. So, and so she raised me by herself, and she was a scientist, and he was too. But anyway, so she was brilliant and very eccentric, very, very eccentric, but in the most wonderful way, I think. Like sometimes we would sing and dance around the house, and she encouraged me never to let anybody make me feel lesser than, because I didn't have a father. I mean, I had a father, but I there was no man. And she didn't make a lot of money because women scientists didn't make much money then. And but she had me take piano lessons, ballet lessons. um, I was in a lot of plays. She just really wanted me to feel comfortable in my own skin. And so she made all of those things happen and possible to give me confidence, and that worked. She helped me be very confident, but not overly confident, which is boring when you see that in people. But just just to, don't let anybody make you feel lesser than. And she gave me a lot of lessons. Like she always said, okay, when you're running into a wall, like, you're trying to get this done, don't do this where you go around it. Go around it. Find a way to go around it. And that has been really a very important mainstay in my life too, because as
Can
a
you give us an
photographer,
example of how you were trying to kind of keep hitting the wall and you did go around it? A real life
well,
story?
I have a great story, but it's mainly work related. But when I graduated from university, I had a degree in journalism and French and a couple of other things. And so there was a little paper. There was a paper in a little town in Texas, which is where I grew up, Galveston, Texas. And they were looking for a reporter photographer. So I drove down there. I'd never been there. I drove down there. I went to see the managing editor. I said, well, I have this and that, and here's some pictures and blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, miss, we're not hiring a woman for that job. We're already considering two men, but we would never hire a woman for that job. And I said, why do you mind if I ask why? And he said, well, it's a nighttime job. And, if you have your car breaks down and you get raped or beaten up or, all these things. And I was sort of like, whoa, all of those things, huh? And he said, so we wouldn't hire you. And so I said, well, tell me a little bit about the job, since I made the effort to come down here. And he did. Of course, you could not say that to a woman these days, right? But then you could, in a small town, you
How
could.
old were you then, may I ask?
I was like
21, 22, something like that.
20, 21,
Yeah,
21.
yeah.
Mhm. And I had worked my way through school. So I was pretty strong. So I got to his door, and then I turned around and I said, well, sir, what time do you come to work? And he said 9 a.m. And he said, why? And I said, well, I'll see you in the morning. And I ran out. And I was staying with a friend who had a dark room. So I went down to the coffee shop in the little town where everybody gathers in the morning to gossip. And I started talking to everybody and say, what is everybody talking about that the paper hasn't reported it? And they said, well, as a matter of fact, there's a big story they haven't reported. And so there was a medical school there, and there was this very beautiful old building that was wooden, and it was oval, and it was where the cadavers, the teachers would show the students, here's the cadaver, this is where the heart is, the kidney, this and that. And it had no windows except slats, and the sun would pour in. And so everybody, the university wanted to take it down to build a parking lot. And everybody was so angry about it because this was part of their history, their town history. So anyway, they let me interview them, and then I went over to the university and I interviewed teachers and students and photographed, and then I snuck into this extraordinary place toward the end of the day. It was beautiful and it almost felt haunted. So I took a bunch of pictures, and then I went back to my friend's house. I developed the film because it was black and white, and I stayed up all night printing and writing a story. So at 9 o'clock the next morning, I showed up at this man's door, and he said, "Miss, I already met with you and I told you we're not hiring you." And I said, "Well, before you call the police to throw me out," I was teasing. I said, "I found a story that everybody in this town is talking about that your paper has not published." So I went and I photographed and I wrote the story. "And would you at least please look at the story and the pictures?" And he said, "Okay." So he read the story, he looked at the pictures, and he was shaking his head like this. And I thought, oh, I guess he doesn't like them. And he was shaking his head. And then he looked at me and he said, "Miss, you have the job. You have the job. Neither of those men would have gone to that trouble. And I want to put it on the front page in tomorrow's paper."
Wow.
And I said,
Oh,
"Okay." And we shook hands,
fantastic.
and that was it. And so that's the idea of don't
That's
do this.
but that's such a lovely
Find a
line
way
to
around
love,
it.
though, because we all will have our brick wall, our metaphorical brick wall. And
Yes.
you were, that's why I had to ask you how old you were, because you were a kid. You were 21 years old.
Mhm.
You were not this wise woman that you are today. You were still figuring things out, but you knew
Mhm.
you wanted to be a photographer and you knew you wanted that. So I'm also hearing what you're saying, which is another lesson that I've learned and that we should all learn, which is the idea of being very clear about what you want and the
Mhm.
motivation within it. But a lot of us, Maggie, don't know what we want. That's the problem.
Well,
We're all a bit
that-
confused. And it's like 21-year-old, you go to university, you come out of it, and you're all confused, and you don't have that sense of deep passion
mhm.
and energy that you have. So then what? I'm just kind of throwing it back at you.
Well, so my boyfriend then also was a photographer, and so he also got a job on the paper. He had a job before I did, so I thought, well, maybe I can get this second job where he just was a photographer. But then it's a small town. I would photograph ladies' teas and tea parties and high school basketball and just all kinds of things. And I would go to the town council meetings and to write about it. And anyway, we broke up, and in not a very nice way on his part. But and I thought, this has been a splendid thing being here for a year, but I'm going to go seek my fortune in New York City because I always wanted to live there. So I
Have you
lived.
ever been? Had you ever been to New York before?
Yeah, when I was 10, my mother took me to meet my father. He lived in New Jersey. So we took a train all the way up because we didn't have a lot of money. And I met my father, and every day for 2 weeks, he would come into Manhattan because we stayed in a hotel for women. And he would take us around, and then I got to meet my grandparents. And so I was completely gaga about New York City. And I always thought, I'm going to live here one day. So I went. And there again, I needed to find a job. So I had a friend who worked as a photo editor at Associated Press Photos in New York. So he said, they're looking for a woman photo editor. They have none and they're under pressure. And I said, oh, that's me. So I went and I applied, and I had a lot of interviews, and they really liked me because I had a degree and in journalism, and I do a good interview.
So it's a little bit of serendipity as well. But before we continue with the story, I just want to be clear, and I don't want to make assumptions again. Your father is white American? What ethnicity is he? Or is he also
Yes,
Cherokee?
he was a Russian Jew.
Right.
But he was born in the U.S. His parents came from Russia through Ellis Island. So, but I'm Cherokee. I'm white and Cherokee. I don't, because in the Jewish religion, if you're
He's
very
the
serious,
mother, isn't it?
the mother has to be Jewish or you're not. And that's okay too.
That's
I'm,
fine. No, but it's
I
just
like,
interesting
I like
because
my mama's side.
you have all of this, when we look at
Mhm.
somebody, as I mentioned earlier, we look at you, we hear your name, we don't know anything about you, but actually
Yeah.
you've got Russian in you, you've got Cherokee in you, you have the
Mhm.
Jewish story as well when we talk about the inheritance, generational
Mhm.
inheritance, whatever that looks like. So there's a
Mhm.
lot within you that we mere social, on a social occasion cannot see and will not know. And I just wanted to flag that up for us. Um, but yeah, so that's another incredible life learning story. Um, I'm just aware that I could hear more and more stories from you, but I'm also aware that
So
we
many.
try and
Yeah, it's too
capture all
much.
these stories together. And I'm wondering, if you look back at all the countries that you've traveled to,
Mhm.
all the life experiences and learning that you've learned, you've taken away, how would you thread them all together for yourself as one giant life learning that you try and
Mhm.
practice every day?
Mhm. Well, I think early on, learning in Haiti, because that was really the first kind of first or second or third foreign country I had gone to uh, after being in Zimbabwe covering a war, which is very different than being there. It's a whole other feeling and things are going on. But I I would say if I had to thread everything together, it was constantly that lesson about don't go in with any concept. Go in with an open mind and an open heart and just watch and just listen because that's the only, I'm never going to be those people, but maybe that's the closest I'll be able to be closer to who they are and what they do and what they believe and what they've endured. Maybe I'll be able to make some images that could even explain that a little bit better so that we don't keep taking the same images and getting this is who they are. And it's not who they are. It's how you, white person, or it doesn't matter if you're white or an
Yeah.
Asian photographer or whatever, it's how you see them, but that's not necessarily who they are. So you have to earn the right. And that's really uh, also something that a thread, I would say, that sews everything together. You have to earn the right, and you only do that by um, being humble, I think, uh, and respectful, and just patient, because those things that you learn are treasures too, and they can be applied to so many situations. Some of the things I've learned saved me actually when I was having some struggles, personal struggles, saved me. So we learned those lessons. Maybe that's why we're here. I always think, what is this Earth? I mean, why are we the only planet with life in the solar system, our solar system? And what is this? Like, how did this get here? And what is that Big Bang thing? I don't know what this is. Is this somebody's dream or what? Uh, but I don't know what I was going to say about that. But oh, I think we are here maybe to learn lessons. I don't know. I don't know.
Which on
I
this
don't know
planet
what.
Earth? No, I'm happy to go with that, and I think it's a lovely conclusion because it's not a it's really what you're saying is put on this planet Earth to learn, to be interested, to try not to be judgmental, and to actually to be part of the larger ecosystem rather
Yes,
than
yes,
consumption.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, and learn from the animals too. They are our brothers and sisters. they are amazing. They're so much smarter in ways that we are. They're smarter than we are in so many ways. And anyway, I think the older I get, the more in wonder I am with nature and our brothers and sisters as opposed to humans. And I'm so smitten. I mean, I think part of that is because I live in Miami and it's very tropical, and I've worked in jungles, and I like that sort of thing. Whereas I lived in New York for 28 years, New York City, and well, that was fun, but
Different kind of jungle, right?
different, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think if we could leave the viewers or the listeners with this idea that there's always going to be a way around anything that is blocking you, but you have to really think about it. How can I get around this barricade that's holding me back? And maybe it means you have to go to something else before you can then come back around. But don't be defeated just because one person says no. That I've had people say no to me 10 times, and I would hear my mother's voice, try one more time. And damn, if the 11th time wasn't a success. You just don't know. You just don't know.
Thank you. I'm going to leave it with your powerful words because they're so simple, and that's what makes it so powerful. Just keep going. Thank you, Maggie Steber. Thank you so much for sharing your stories seldom told.
Thank you, Smita, for your interest, and thank you for making such a wonderful place where we can talk and have you have a lovely podcast here. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Stories Seldom Told. I am Smitha Tharoor. It is you, the listener, that makes this podcast what it is. If you like this podcast, please do share. If any of you anywhere in the world feel that you have stories to share, please do connect with me on social media at Smitha Tharoor on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or on my company page, Tharoor Associates, on Facebook. We will be back next week.